And next. So first of all, you'd be surprised, right? I was a genuine slacker in college and university. A lot of people will be surprised, and it's only recently I get the self-confidence to publicly admit, right? I was probably like a solid B minus student, teetering on the edge of dropping to like a solid, C plus student. So I wasn't like I didn't ace university, I didn't ace college. Um, I have to confess, I worked like crazy during high school, and my parents, my brother, made the fateful decision to send me to a New England boarding school called Deerfield, which has always been kind of like a feeder school to the Ivy Leagues, together with the likes of Phillips Andover and Exeter and so on. Plus little help from a bit of affirmative action, right? Like being the only Indonesian, or very one of very few Indonesians or even Southeast Asians, right? Had a better chance. And keep in mind that back then it was just so much easier to get into these universities. When I got in, the acceptance rate was like 16% or 14%. Today it's below 1%, right? And Boston University, for example, where my godson, is graduating this summer, like today has an admission rate of like 14%, right, 16%. So, but yeah, I certainly did not ace university. I really enjoyed my time though. Harvard Square, Boston is a great town, and I really took it all in and then really had a wonderful time. The world at that time was also so much simpler, right? It was so much less complicated. Hard as it is to imagine, no internet. The company called Netscape, came out with the first ever web browser, like the year after I graduated, right? Like 95, 96. And that marked the beginning of the World Wide Web. But yeah, when I was in your age, when I was in university, no internet. It was already considered like I was already considered like a spoiled rich kid for having a cell phone, a mobile phone, and it was an analog phone. And this was even before SMS, right? So long before WhatsApp and BlackBerry Messenger. There was a decade maybe of like SMS, right? On Nokia phones and Ericsson phones. And this was even before this. This was like phone calls only, no text message. But it was an exhilarating time because the Cold War had suddenly ended. Again, I would struggle to explain just how tense and fearful the decades of the Cold War were. A lot of us really lived in fear of like nuclear annihilation or nuclear war. And then suddenly, the Soviet Union collapsed, and there was quite a bit of euphoria that no more nuclear threat. Capitalism had won, and what have you. Of course, this euphoria would ultimately, be a bit misguided because we now realize what are the shortcomings of capitalism. And every success carries within it the seeds of its own destruction. So maybe this euphoria, and triumphant West, over time led to complacency or what have you. But it was a period of remarkable innocence in many respects. That's why when I compare myself to you guys, like you guys are so much more sophisticated, and you're dealing with a complexity in the world today and global challenges that dwarf anything that my generations have to deal with. Now, next, as I transition to the workplace, yeah, and obviously I ended up splitting my time between private sector and public sector. But I studied architecture at Harvard, right? It's a funky major called Visual Environmental Studies, VES, but it's as close as you get to studying architecture in a liberal arts program at Harvard. And at that time, I was harboring dreams of being like a star architect, like a star architect, right? Like some really remarkable buildings were going up, and I was really good at drawing and so on. And so I thought I want to be an architect. And then at Harvard, I discovered that I was actually no good. Like, in fact, I was no good at all. Like, I had no talent for it. That's why, ultimately, probably I also didn't do well grades wise. And yet, I thought that, with the Harvard diploma, I had it made. Like, the world owes me a living, right? So I was as arrogant and as obnoxious as they probably come at that age. And realizing that I'd be no good as an architect, I switched quickly to investment banking. Right, I worked at Wall Street, first with Morgan Stanley in New York, and then with Morgan Stanley in Singapore, and then eventually with Deutsche Bank in Jakarta, and then sort of the golden age of hedge funds started, and I joined an American hedge fund called Farallon Capital, which we ended up doing a famous deal, which is acquiring 51% of Bank BCA together with Jarum family in 2002. Another funny tidbit: the founder of Farallon Capital, Tom Steyer, actually ran for president, in the Democratic primaries, and actually made it quite far. Like, I was really startled. We were really startled, my colleagues and I, that he made it that far. I think he made it into like top 6 or something, together with, of course, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris and and so on. But it's like, wow, Tom Steyer, we thought he'd be eliminated really quickly, but he made it surprisingly far. And then, I had the good fortune of being approached by a number of investors, particularly Stanford University Endowment and Duke University Endowment, to see if my team and I would spin out from Farallon instead of our own fund, right? And that's how QAT Capital came into being. And we ultimately got $493 million of capital commitments from mostly university endowments and certain wealth funds and the like. But again, we can hopefully talk more about this in the Q&A, but I also didn't do that great, frankly, at Morgan Stanley. I was far from being like a star, top ranked associate or what have you. I did much better at Deutsche Bank. And obviously at Farallon, by the time I get to Farallon, we really killed it. I mean, we made so much money for our investors. And then, QVAT happened, and we suffered a lot of difficulties and a lot of challenges. And, I probably personally committed a lot of failures. So, if there's one thing I want you guys to take away from this talk today is, my life and career, again, were more littered with failures, some pretty scary ones, right? And it was much more of a roller coaster ride and much more zigzag. But let me assure you, it all kind of works out okay in the end, So the other major takeaway I would want you guys to have from this talk is, I think it's good to be crazy. Like, be crazy, like, be stupid, like, be open to just nutty, unexpected serendipitous things, and embrace the failures that unavoidably happen when you do that, right? So, at the same time that you guys are very formidable and battle scarred, there is a worry among certainly my generation, that all these challenges end up making you guys very cautious, right? Very careful and fearful of, whether it's global warming or ocean plastics like microplastics and all these things. But as I look back, and I'm turning 50 next week, I'm hitting the half century mark next week. As I look back, I think it was good. It was good that we were so crazy, did such crazy things, and they led to scary disasters, but also to some obviously very, very nice achievements and memorable experiences. So next. So in 2013, circa 2013, a mutual friend insisted that I meet this, up and coming rising politician named Jokowi, who had then just been elected governor of Jakarta, right? And I was like, I really don't have any interest in politics. I would probably get slaughtered if I entered politics. I'm so blunt and straightforward. um, I hate sucking up. I also don't like it when people try to suck up to me. So, and in Indonesia, sucking up and being sucked up to is like a core skill, in for survival in politics. But somehow Governor Jokowi and I really clicked, and I became one of his economic advisors behind the scenes during the 2014 campaign, and then more visibly as one of his major speechwriters. And then in 2015, he startled me certainly and everyone by saying, gimana kalau menteri pedagangnya Pak Tom aja? It's like I was like, wah, Pak, jangan gitu dong. And I was like, no, seriously, like, what do you think, right? And then after that meeting, he dispatched, our mutual friends, and so it's like, hey, I think the president is quite serious about this. Like, would you accept the job? Would you take it? And so I consulted with my with my fellow partners, right, at QVAT and Principia, and said, of course you got to take it, right? Like, when the president of the republic like asks you to help, right, and asks you to serve, in fact, like you don't turn that down. So I did, and it was incredible. Small tidbit: a lot of people don't realize I had a previous stint in government. So after the 97-98 Asian financial crisis, I spent 2 years at this agency called the Indonesian Bank Restructuring Agency, or IBRA, or locally known more as Badan Penyihatan Perbankan, right, BPPN. So I had a taste for bureaucracy because that agency was formed by Kementerian Keuangan and Bank Indonesia, and and so I had some familiarity with what the bureaucracy and the kementerian and menteri and so on was like. But next slide. I had no idea that it would be as thrilling as it would be, right? And I guess I get really, really lucky, right? Because Pak Jokowi is such a fun guy. I mean, he is a really funny and fun guy. For the crusty, arrogant, feudalistic politics that we had at the time, I mean, he was a huge breath of fresh air, right? So, for example, like when he goes to the daerah, or he is asked to speak at events, and then how he calls people on stage and does the impromptu quiz show, right? I think, okay, Pancasila, like name the 5 Pancasila, right? Okay, we have 34 provinces in the country. Name like 5 provinces, right? And then okay, dapat sepeda, toh ambil sepedanya, right? That was such a breath of fresh air. So here you see the president and me, with then Prime Minister of Australia, Malcolm Turnbull, and for Turnbull's state visit, but Jokowi decided to take him belusukan to Pasar Tanah Abang, right? And again, it was so much fun, right? And for Turnbull, it was like a mind-bending experience, right? Like being in his Pasar Tanah Abang with all the wholesalers and textile traders and what have you. And of course, there's no aircon there. I don't know about now, but back then certainly there wasn't. So we were all like drenched in sweat. And I became lifelong friends with Prime Minister Turnbull. Like he and I were just WhatsApping each other last week. So he's an amazing guy. But again, I wouldn't have foreseen that this is how my 4 years in cabinet would be. Another one next, who became a lifelong friend and also a mentor, is Germany Economy Minister Peter Altmaier. If you can go to the next slide. So he's another person that when we met at Davos, I asked him, Minister Altmaier, Peter, would you consider being my mentor, right? Because I foresee still many years, maybe decades ahead in private and public sector. And he happily obliged, and he said, hey, I'm trying to learn more about Asia. Maybe you can mentor me on that, right? Uh, Now, look, I want to emphasize that it wasn't all, fun and games. It wasn't all like, a straight line up. There was some debacles. There was some mistakes that I made. Uh, Thankfully, no scandal. Even that's already a big achievement. Let me tell you, like the corruption in our country is so bad, and in many ways unavoidable. And the nexus between politics and business, kepentingan. I mean, we see, how even America can have a shocking turn towards corruption in an industry with regulators. If you're familiar, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the opioid crisis, right? Opioid overdoses is astonishing, and McKinsey just paid $500 million of penalties for their role in advising pharmaceutical companies, on how to capitalize on the opioid epidemic, right? So corruption is not it's far from unique to Indonesia. It's sort of everywhere. So just being able to avoid scandal, I consider that already like a significant achievement. But yeah, again, we can talk specifics during the Q&A, but there's some hairy moments when I thought, wow, this is bad. This is a debacle, right? But again, all things worked out okay in the end. Now, I'll try to quickly rush through the next few slides because it's more sort of my obligatory, advice as your elder and public figure. And I guess we'll distribute these materials, freely to all of you guys after this talk. But I guess 3 quick advice or suggestions. So a pitch from me as a history buff. I think if you can get into the study of history, it's a really powerful instrument. It's like a really powerful tool. It's actually astonishing, like how a lot of the things that we experience today have historical parallels in the past, right? And the global pandemic today. So in 1815, the largest volcanic eruption in recorded history happened in Indonesia, right? Tambora. And basically, it darkened the global atmosphere to such an extent that it was snowing in North America in the summer, right? And so the following year, 1816, was a year of global darkness and winter and famine, right? Because the Tambora eruption darkened the global atmosphere and cooled the weather so much that you had like massive crop failures and agricultural failures, and it was a real global crisis. Another book recommendation, the famous Jared Diamond. His more famous book is called Guns, Germs, and Steel. But again, we're in the middle of the worst global crisis since World War II. So if you look for a book on crises, this book Upheaval, Turning Points for Nations in Crisis is a really good one. It shows how we've coped with crises in the past, and I think a lot of inspirational writings on how we may want to cope with the crisis today, right? But yeah, look, one thing I look back on when I was your age, wistfully, is the opportunity I had to still read like crazy, and again, all that knowledge that I amassed in my 20s is like modal, right? It's like capital that serves me until today. And again, I sneak away or steal time wherever I can to read my Economist and my New Scientist magazine, and quickly read the first few chapters of a few books. But yeah, history is like a really powerful tool if you're able to get yourself into it. As even like a hobby or you know, and entertainment, right? History is also incredibly entertaining. Um, the next one is, look, I keep talking about our global challenges, right? Climate change, microplastics, inequality, and you know, we can talk a lot about how screwed up is industry, you know, how screwed up is the financial sector, you know, uh, stock market bubbles and the like. But keep going deeper, guys. You know, keep going deeper. And when you start to get to the roots of the issue, it really is like our hyper consumptive and in many ways kind of like you know, ambitious materialistic culture, right? And again, the good news is you guys are probably on track to be the least greedy, the least materialistic, like the most idealistic generation, you know, ever. But I tell you, you know, we can't get there fast enough. And the other risk is, whilst you know, many among you guys, you know, among us might be, you know, less greedy, less materialistic. There's plenty of OKB, orang kaya baru, and plenty of, you know, rat race, you know, hard elbows, you know, claw your way to the top around the world. That I think, you know, we need to make it sort of a mission to be, you know, to be less consumptive, you know, to redefine success in a way, right? Like, what does it mean to be successful? And you know, again, when I was growing up, to be successful means flying on a private jet. You know, means like having a big, you know, home, or like in an expensive neighborhood or what have you. You know, driving like fancy car. And again, I think you're well on your way to redefining success, right? But I think for the sake of the planet and for the sake of our society, we also got to make it, you know, less consumptive, less materialistic, and you know, it's easier than ever. You know, with the sharing economy, you know, you no longer have to own a car. You just, you know, hail a car or hail a ride, or you know, rent your dream car for, you know, the couple of days a year that you are actually going to drive it. So you know, you don't waste money by buying one and it sits there in your garage, right, unused. And then, you know, yes, there's some dark corners of social media. You know, there's some serious downsides of social media, but it's also, you know, enabling a totally new way of forming communities, right? Trading knowledge and meaning across the world. But yeah, ultimately, I really, really believe the root cause of the inequality, the, you know, wasteful consumption is that we have to totally redefine what success is and how we manifest success, right? How we show off our success. Lastly, again, this is my effort to get everyone, you know, to the root causes of our issues. Next slide. You know, and again, your generation probably is a generation that thinks the most about this compared to our previous generations. But ultimately, it is about values. You know, it is about what we stand for. And another student organization, another startup, which we're working with, called Cornerstone, right? They just ran like a workshop called Dream Job, and they really coached the participants. You know, take the time to really write down what you stand for. You know, who you are, because as you apply for jobs, right, as you position yourself in the workplace, as you position yourself, you know, in the market, especially in the era of social media, right, your personal brand, like your brand, becomes so important, and almost no less than a Nike or an Apple or a Goldman Sachs, right? Each and every one of us sort of has to determine what's our brand, like what do we stand for. You know, when I went into policy and politics, I had to decide, do I want to change? Do I want to become more penjilat, right? Do I want to get more into this culture? And certainly I would be able to last longer, right? Maybe I would still be in cabinet if I was like a total sycophant, if I was like a total penjilat, right? But I decided I want to have a different brand. And that brand is actually, built around being very truthful, publicly sharing inconvenient truths or not so good news. I also thought it was just good strategy, good business strategy, like under promise and over deliver, right? Like manage expectations and like set the bar low. uh, uh, another benefit of honesty a lot of times, of admitting non-successes or failures. But yeah, at the root of so many of our failures and global challenges are moral failings, right? Like it's a failure to appreciate the impact you're having on other people. It's a failure to empathize with the poorest or the most affected around the world, or even in your own neighborhood, right? It's a lack of self-awareness or a lack of thoughtfulness and measuredness, that ultimately leads to this overconsumption and excess and what have you. So I think with that, maybe we can switch to the Q&A because that's always more fun for me. And then I can actually address what you guys want me to talk about rather than what I want to talk about. But maybe that's sort of my brief intro and overview of my career and my life to date, and a few things that I think are important today. Yeah. So maybe back to Alvin and organizers and moderators.
Thank you, Pa. Thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. I believe like everyone was able to learn from your experience, since you experience back in the school or even when you were working as a banker and even as a minister. So I think we'll just move on to the Q&A session. So let me just remind everyone again. So we are doing the Q&A in two ways. First is you can just type in the questions like in the chat box, and then we'll choose some of the most interesting questions. If you are shy to ask your questions directly to Patom, or if you want to ask your questions directly, you can just use the raise hand feature in your Zoom, and then we'll choose. We'll go one by one. We'll take one question at a time. So Patom will answer one question, and we'll move on to the next question. So yeah, I guess we can start. Wow, we have two hands right now. Why don't we first start with James Liman? Shoot your question.
Okay, thank you. Selamat malam, Pak. I'm very, very interested in your quote of being smart is very, very different from being right. Can you give us an example of that?
That's a great question. Thank you, James. So, I really see this as a major, major risk for the most overeducated among us. Yeah, which is that we think we're so smart. Yeah, but if you're wise over time, you'll recognize that you're at best only going to be right 30% of the time, right? And that totally makes sense because nature is unpredictable, life's unpredictable, and no matter how smart you are, no human being has the superpower to be able to predict the future. The future is inherently uncertain, right? It's a statistical lottery, right? So you have to recognize that you're going to be wrong most of the time. And the mistake that I certainly made is, I thought I was so smart, and I was extremely sought out, right? And my favorite phrase to address that or to illustrate that now, is called being brilliantly wrong. Yeah. So us overeducated people, we're really good at coming up with a sophisticated justification to our beliefs. It's brilliant. It's amazing. It's like, wow, right? But again, at best, you'll be right like 20, 30% of the time. And what becomes more important then is having the humility to quickly recognize, oh shit, this is going south. Like we're off, guys. We're totally off. Like course correction, quick course correction. The other thing that you'll discover is that the magic pill, the magic cure to this human fallibility is teamwork. Yeah. So I was very lucky to, over time, form a team that's still together until today. My best friend still, took over from me as CEO of Principia and Cubat when I went off to join the cabinet. But I'm a member of a team, and when you're an effective team, you can probably get your ratio of being right up to 40-50%, right? And again, you're just checks and balances on each other, right? So both in the workplace later, or even in your private life, having a close group of friends, like 3 of you, 4 of you, and you curhat, right? And correct each other, and it's a safe space where you can correct each other, right? Where you can be candid with each other and catch each other, right? That's very, very powerful. But yeah, beware of being, brilliantly wrong. You put together a sophisticated argument that justru lebih menjerumuskan, right? Because it's difficult to argue back. But it's very impressive, right? That's how you ace a test or score a prestigious job, right? It's by wowing people, but that's very different from actually trying to get it right, in life and in policy and in business.
Thanks a lot, Pak.
So before we move on to the next question, like if you before you ask your question, perhaps you want to do a quick introduction about yourself for those who are trying to ask question, like which school do you guys go to? So next up we have Andrew. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Pato. My name is Andrew. I'm a first-year MBA student at Georgetown University. My question is, having worked in both politics and business, we see right now that there's an erosion in trust towards government as a whole globally. And, you see a rise in cryptocurrency, you see a rise in alternative banking. So, having worked in both government and business, what's your stance on government role and how do we rebuild that trust?
That's such a fundamental question. Thank you, Andrew. And I used to always like scoff at politicians and government. So again, I grew up during a period of triumphant capitalism, right? Like capitalism had conquered communism, and free market orthodoxy was on the rise, and it was all about deregulation and shrinking the government and getting rid of the government and just leave everything to us, high-powered folks in the private sector. And boy, I tell you, after 4 years in government, and obviously we're in a period of rapidly expanding government role around the world with the pandemic and everything, I got to tell you guys, the sad and disgusting reality is like politics is everything. Ultimately, which is just disgusting and kind of depressing because, we are sleazebags. It is slimy. It's horrible, but guess who put us here? It's you guys, right? It's the voters. And yeah, if you think about it, that's just how, our societies are organized. So if we keep putting in place, sleazebags, to be the political masters of the policymakers, and we're, not willing to hold our nose and jump in ourselves and be one with the slime bags, jump into the snake pit and be one of the sleaze bags, at least for a few years. You don't have to, be there your whole life. But unless we do that, we're not getting out of this. Now, just to linger on that point a little bit more. So one of my, global mentors, again, sort of president, prime minister, senior minister type mentors, said to me, Tom, the problem is these days, normal people just don't go into politics anymore. So, 20 years ago, we had this problem. The best and the brightest no longer go into government and politics. Like the best and the brightest go to Wall Street. Go to the technology companies, go to the consulting firms, whatever. Like, the best and the brightest don't go to politics or government. Now it's even worse. Like the normal people don't go into politics and policy, right? It's only the nutcases and the sleaze bags and the slime, right? Now, one of my, pleas to audiences like you guys is to consider spending 1, 2, or 3 years in public sector, in government. And again, thanks to Pak Jokowi, this is more possible than ever in Indonesia. Like I have so many, friends, even like a nephew, and even my sister-in-law who interned at KSP in the Istana, at Kantor Staf Presiden. And I think, ministries, agencies are more open than ever to taking on private sector interns. So that's just one example of a route. But yeah, I don't know how attractive it would be to work for a BUMN. It's also got its own kind of sleaze and slime problems. But yeah, I think, do think about it. Thank you very much for your question, Andrew. How do we rebuild all this? Again, I think bottom up, painstakingly, like community by community, group by group, community by community. I mean, yes, there's a lot of things we can do top down. There's a lot of things we can do to hold the platforms like Facebook and Google accountable for removing, hate speech or, bullying and what have you. But yeah, I'm always keen to come back to our personal responsibility. Each and every one of us in our communities, and again, leadership is something that everybody can practice, not just the leaders. I've been impressed with janitors. I've been impressed with low-level clerical, like how they show leadership, by being selfless or very considerate, extra thoughtful, paying attention to details and setting a good example for people. And again, whilst we do all the superficial things or the top-down things, let's never ever forget, the root causes, right? Our culture, our behavior, our values, and that's where each and every one of your personal brand, what you stand for, it's not only going to help you get the best job or the job that fits you best, right? It changes the people around you. It affects the people around you. It sets an example, and it makes people react, right? Either in a vicious circle of mutual bullying, right, or in a virtuous circle, vicious cycle or virtuous circle, right? Virtuous circle of inspiring each other and improving each other. So.
Great answer, Pak. Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. Perhaps just to share a bit for all of us, I do consider working in the public sector because Indonesia needs us. So next, I think we have Daniel Kurniawan. Go ahead and shoot your question. Don't forget to introduce yourself.
Hello, Pak Tom. My name is Daniel, and I'm an alumni from University of Wisconsin-Madison. And right now I'm working as a process control engineer in the USA. My question is actually related to the point that you just talked about. So how do you build like an Indonesian network as like a professional in the USA? Like, for example, how do you go from like working as an investment bankers in the USA to like the public sector in Indonesia? And what's your story? I guess that's what I'm curious. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Well, again, I probably have to highlight how different the world was back then, right? It was very much a telephone-based world. Everything was phone calls. And for me to reestablish a network in Indonesia meant I had to move back to the region, right? I have to be physically present. So I went from Morgan Stanley, New York, first to Morgan Stanley, Singapore, and then weaseled my way down to Morgan Stanley's local partner in Indonesia, a securities firm at the time called McKinsey, right? And I volunteered to help establish the joint venture between Morgan Stanley and PT McKinsey. That securities firm is not really around anymore, but I guess in this day and age, right? You're benefiting from social media. You're benefiting from entrepreneurial platforms like this Kerja.io, my little pitch to Cornerstone Education. I think they're also considering to establish a product which is more like career development. Obviously LinkedIn, and so on. But yeah, I guess it's the same, the sort of age-old answer, right? Proactive outreach, be aggressive, be shameless. There's bad shameless and there's good shameless, guys. A lot of the sleaze bags in politics, it's a bad kind of shameless. But there's also a good kind of shameless. Don't be shy, be aggressive, be assertive. I think that's maybe one benefit of our overseas education. We get acculturated to being quite assertive and being less shy. I note that more of the local grads in Indonesia are much more shy, much more scared to speak up, much less assertive, even though they're smarter than many of us in many respects, right? Otherwise, networking. I guess the other thing that comes to mind, sorry, I keep coming back to the same things, right? Like curate your personal brand very carefully. So one of our sayings at Principia and Cuvat is your reputation is everything, like guard it with your life. And I think on balance, I believe that this will work for you individually, right? And what I'm talking about is being honest. Like the $1 trillion question, guys, is to be successful, right, in this horrible world, which by the way is infinitely better today than 20 or 30 years ago, and I'm very sure it's going to be 20, 30 times better again 20 years from now. But it's still, so much sleaze, right? So many problems, and now with hoax and fake news, like, is it better to be honest, or is it better to be deceitful? Is it better to lie? Let's just try to be objective here, right? Like, what's the better path to success? And I'm hopeful, that empirically, you're better positioned for success if you're honest. If you try the truth. You still have to be smart about it, you still have to be clever about it. Like you don't want to be undiplomatic, right? But I think being truthful can be a surprisingly potent weapon, a secret weapon. But there's a lot of qualifiers to that, guys. Pope Benedict, the one before the current Pope Francis, apparently once said, without love, the truth is unbearable. So, the saying that we know is like, the truth shall set you free, right? Eventually. But that truth has to come with caring and warmth and respect and considerateness, right? Consideration. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself into hot water if you convey the truth in a clumsy way, right? In a thoughtless and inconsiderate way. So yeah, hopefully those are helpful tips on how to network, right? How to present yourself.
Thank you, Pa, for your tips. I guess we can move on to the next question, and perhaps because we have to be mindful of the time, we'll do like one last a full question, and then perhaps we'll take the next 3 questions, just like a rapid fire question, and we'll wrap up the session after that. Sorry for everyone. I think we don't have the time to go through all of the questions. I know you guys are all like so into like asking the questions, but unfortunately, it's the time that stands between us and your chance to asking your questions. So perhaps next, Hans. Hans, if I recall, have you asked your question?
I haven't.
Oh, okay. Go ahead then. Shoot your question.
All right.
My bad.
Thank you for the opportunity. So my name is Hans Andrian, and I'm actually quite like younger than like the other asker. I'm a freshman at the University of South Carolina, majoring in business. So I'm really new right here. So please excuse me if like my question is a little bit naive. So as a person that has been experiencing the private and the public sector, I'm interested in the way like people usually like to contradict like how public and private sectors actually work. Like the private sectors, they are profit oriented. For example, they will all catch the profits that they have, and the public service, on the other hand, their whole target is that the people's welfare. And then like I believe that what is the most important thing for us is that those private sectors and the public sectors can actually work together. And like my question is that how can actually both sectors coordinate to make a better society? Because they all have like different goals. How can actually like they coordinate together so that they can actually improve and build a better Indonesia? Thank
Yeah. Thank you, Hans. That's actually a terrific question and very far from naive. So, and I'm going to try to mind the time because Alvin, if it's at all possible, if you guys are all amenable, I want a bit more gender balance in the questioners. So if you can accommodate, 1 or 2 more questions from the ladies, I don't know. I get the sense that maybe we went in order, or whoever's on the front screen, and which happens to be more guys, right? Can get 1 or 2 more questions from our female colleagues.
We'll do that.
But private sector and public sector, right? So just to share with you guys, and maybe you can keep this in the back of your minds and help me with this little secret mission that I have. Is to open up the bureaucracy in Indonesia to more private sector people, yeah, and to make it more commonplace in Indonesia and maybe even in ASEAN for people to go back and forth between private sector and public sector, the way they do in the USA, yeah. So in the USA, as you notice, right, like people go back and forth, like they work on Wall Street, then do a stint at Treasury Department or State Department, or with the governor's office in Iowa, or the governor's office in California, or the mayor's office in Detroit or something, and then go back to private sector. So there's this natural flow of personnel back and forth. I was quite startled to discover that that's not at all commonplace around the world. So definitely in East Asia, extremely uncommon. Like the vast majority of civil servants are career civil servants. They have 0 private sector experience. Yeah, and the bureaucracy is so closed, right, that it's very difficult for a private sector person to come in and be like a echelon 3 or echelon 4, right? So the bureaucracy is quite hierarchical, right? There's like minister, then there's the secretary general and directors general, like sekjen dirjen, then there's director, there's kasubdit, right? That's the structural position. And then it's like eselon 1, eselon 2, eselon 3, eselon 4, right? And it's like eselon 2A, 2B, very complicated. But again, I think Pak Jokowi sort of opened up the bureaucracy to private sector, flow more than ever. And my, my goal is to have more private sector spending time in public sector. It is really about people. It really is about people. Another example is like this, guys. If a civil servant, and these are extremely prized jobs, yeah. Like, there's probably like the acceptance rate is probably like 1 or 2%. Like hundreds of people will apply for one job to be a PNS, right? Pegawai negeri sipil, PNS. Then you have job security for life. But if say an eselon 4 leaves the bureaucracy and works in private sector for say 4 or 5 years, when she and he wants to come back into the bureaucracy, it's like they never moved. It's like they get no credit for that 4 or 5 years in the private sector. They go right back to being an eselon 4, right? Now imagine if we actually give credit. In fact, imagine if we actually value, right? Put a premium on private sector experience, and when they come back, they actually can jump straight to eselon 2 or something like that. They get like they get fast track for promotion to the private sector, right? I think that would revolutionize the government and the bureaucracy. But mind you, this kind of change is always going to be met with a lot of resistance. Like a lot of people will really resist. The bureaucracy will be very, very resistant. So you have to cut a deal with them, right? You have to strike a deal. All right, I want this, but I'll give you that, right? So I thought if I was ever going to raise the salaries of the bureaucracy, the bureaucrats, right? Like a lot of the pejabat are underpaid, which is why they have to resort to corruption. If I was ever going to raise their salary, I would say, all right, I'm going to raise your salary, but I want the following reforms, and yeah, Hans, I know maybe being in school, you're looking for some very technical or policy type answer, right, or professional answer, but it really comes down to people. It comes down to that mutual understanding, that mutual experience, like cross-fertilizing experience across public sector and private sector. At least in Indonesia, yeah. In the US, it's already happening, right? But I'm going to assume you're asking for like specifically Indonesia. Okay.
Thank you, Pak.
Thank you, Pak.
Thank
so
you.
For the last question, like we'll take 3 questions and then we'll pay more attention to gender equality this time. So I guess Batari, you can ask your question. Rima, you can go next, and then hold on, let me take a look. Ray, you can ask your question. So we will first start with Batari, and then after Batari finished her question, Rima, you can go ahead and ask your question, and then we'll do that. It's the same thing with Ray.
Hi everyone, my name is Batari. I'm a first student from University of Toronto. And before I ask that question, I kind of want to give a shout out to Natasha Chung, because me and Nat went to the same high school together, and she's a valuable person. I think she would do well in your organization. But yeah, anyways, my question is that I've been asking a lot of upper year students and alumni, and they all told me that as you get older, people tend to focus on your experience and your skills more than your grades. Like they don't put as much emphasis on how your academics, and they look at your networking and skills. And I kind of want to just ask your opinion. What do you think of that?
Very good question. Thank you,
Next,
Batari.
Rima, you can shoot your question.
Hi, Patom. Thank you for the opportunity. So nice to meet you here. I am currently working in Pertamina. So as you mentioned before, you mentioned a lot about BUMN before, right? About federal enterprise. I am interested on one point that you made about that this is now the perfect time for us to like let's say like increase the morality to help like increase the morality. So the one thing that came to mind is about efficiency, right? In state-owned enterprises, we're not really cost aware. In terms of budget and stuff. So other than that, do you have any other idea about increasing morality? Just anything. I'll take that. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Barima. It's a
Yeah.
very good question, of course, like, practical terms, like, how do we increase morality? Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want to just answer quickly the first two questions, or are you okay?
Oh, it's okay. Ahead? It's okay.
Sure.
The third one.
Ray, you can ask your question.
Okay, Tom. Thanks for sharing your insights. Fantastic. I'm Ray, my final session university. So I will be joining American Investment Bank after graduation. Very excited about that at the same time. But you mentioned about your BCA transaction. I was wondering what formed your conviction about Indonesia's economic trajectory that compelled you, or that convinced Caroline to buy out BCA. Given Indonesia has just been battle scarred by a crisis, some global trust on EMs extremely scant, as they are currently.
Yeah. Thank you, Ray. So I'll answer these three questions. Yeah, Batari and Rima and Ray's questions. Sorry, if you can mute yourselves, because I'm getting a bit of feedback. So Batari, I'm probably living proof that your grades ultimately don't matter so much, because as I said, I was like a solid B- student on the brink of being like a C+ student, and obviously my irresistible charm enabled me to lobby my way through Wall Street and into business.
Is it my connection or?
Nope. Sorry, my internet was iffy. Yeah, my internet went iffy on me for a second. And again, I apologize. You can mute yourselves. Thank you. I would suggest maybe if you're able to focus more on like the good influence it has on you to aim for a goal like a good grade, right? Like less than the grades themselves, like the process of getting those good grades, right? Like the passion, the responsibleness, all the things that are good that you have to be to get good grades, rather than the grades themselves, right? Because over time, again, sorry to keep coming back to this, right? Your personal brand, how thoughtful, how reliable you are, how trustworthy you are, how conscientious, how hardworking. So all those things are things that tend to also give you good grades. So if you get good grades because of that, that's good, right? Because if you get good grades because you just know how to ace tests, right? But you have a somewhat cynical approach to, well, I just want the grade, like I don't care about anything else. This is probably going to be less good for you over time. But yeah, very quickly, guys, your sincerity, your thoughtfulness, your trustworthiness, like how far people believe they can rely on you will matter so much more than your grades, very, very quickly. So yes, thank you for that great question. And then Mbak Rima, morality, right? One thing I'm always keen to underscore and highlight is I'm quite a practical and pragmatic guy. And I believe, being practical and pragmatic is really important in life. Just be practical, just be pragmatic. That incidentally also helps us become less judgmental, right? And it even helps with depression. Like you can get really depressed thinking about some of this stuff if you're not practical. But a few things, right? I just mentioned to Batari's question, how sincere you are, right? How sincere you come across, how thoughtful you are. And I always like to draw our attention, people's attention to the small things, the details. Yeah. So simple thing, guys. You will soon be spending more time than you ever thought in meeting rooms and boardrooms. Yeah. And then one thing I observe, like when everybody like gets up, meeting's finished, people get up, right? Just leave the room. Then all the chairs are like all over the place. Like just putting your chair back where it was, just leaving the room in rapi, like putting your chairs back. That says something about you, well, I think this is why silly moments by politicians go viral, right? Like one time, you may have seen this on Instagram or whatever, right? Like the viral video of Netherlands, Holland, Prime Minister Mark Rutte, who I know, right? Like spilled his coffee, like, and then he's like, oh wait, and he walks over to the janitor, borrows a mop, and then mops up the spill himself. Like that sort of thing goes viral, right? But it's again, and again, I hate pencitraan, to be honest. I hate sort of like this image making, right? It's fake, inauthentic, pura-pura, like even humility, like being humble, pura-pura rendah hati, right? Like it quickly degenerates into like jilat. But yeah, when you're talking to somebody or you're in a meeting, giving that person or giving a group of people your full and undivided attention, like not like sambil main handphone or whatever, right? Again, they don't teach you guys this, they don't teach us this stuff in school. Aside from the benefit of my boarding school in Massachusetts being a feeder school to the Ivy Leagues, one thing that you learn, from those teachers and mentors and coaches, and frankly from each other, is those little things. Like okay, the really cheesy example would be like opening the door for another person, or but I really believe the bigger morality, comes from the smaller moralities. It comes from being being considerate, like being sincere, right? Being honest, right? And look, guys, when you think about it, right? Like we are all heavily disincentivized from being honest. Like we're all heavily incentivized to lie and be dishonest. For example, with a colleague, right? Like there's almost no upside to giving constructive criticism. Just like puja-puji aja. Ya kan? Like if you give the constructive criticism, like, okay, the person, the upside is the person adjusts and changes and improves, right? Maybe, they will be grateful for your feedback, but they might also resent it, right? The downside is they really don't like it, and you've just, pissed them off, right? That's why, back to Pope Benedict's saying, without love, the truth is unbearable, right? So again, like being caring, right? Putting in the effort to be truthful, the small things, and then over time they will lead you to big moral dilemmas and moral choices. And when those moral dilemmas confront you, hopefully a lifetime of practicing the small moral things has trained you to make the right decision on the big moral dilemmas, right? So now, sorry, the third gentleman, Ray, right? Ray. What was it like? So again, some of you guys probably still remember 97, 98 financial crisis, Asian financial crisis. It was just incredible, right? And then Indonesia was thrown into an unbelievable degree of disarray, not only because of the financial crisis, right? And bakar-bakaran, and thousands of people killed, anti-Chinese riots, segala macam lah. But after a brief period of respite, like Gus Dur became president, right? Abdurrahman Wahid became president, and then he kind of went nuts, right? Like he basically, degenerated, and I mean, he's blind, he's legally blind. So government and politics became chaotic, and the sale of 51% of Bank BCA took place like 5 months after President Wahid was impeached, right? And I can tell you 70-80% of think tanks and analysts around the world assumed at that time that Indonesia will not survive this as a unitary state. Like they just assumed that what happened in Eastern Europe, where Yugoslavia broke up into like 7 different countries, right? And Czechoslovakia broke up into the Czech Republic and Slovakia, right? And so on. So what's called Balkanization. People just assume that Indonesia will balkanize into like 3 or 4 different countries, right? But the government of Indonesia at the time was willing to sell Bank BCA at a valuation that was like PE multiple of 2, right? Like, most stocks today in the stock market are trading at a PE multiple of 20, 25 or whatever, right? Like Tesla must be trading at a PE multiple of like 1,000, Here's, the largest private sector bank in the country, and they want to sell the shares at a PE multiple of 2. Which is such a cheap asset. But you'd be surprised, right? Like, why did that all go well and ultimately end on a happy note, right? Like, there's no time now to get into the specifics or the details, but being guided by that moral compass was really key, was really critical. Like what you're prepared to do, what you're not prepared to do, right? How far you're willing to go, right? Who you're willing to throw under the bus, like who you're willing to betray and who you're not willing to betray. These will be choices that will define, not only the magnitude of your success, but also the nature and flavor of your success. You might accumulate massive success in your life, but it will be flavored bitter and sour throughout, right? Based on who you've betrayed and who you've decided not to betray, who you've decided to save and who's decided to save you, right? Because again, it was chaos, and winning the bid was one thing, right? Once you own it, it's the beginning of all your troubles, frankly, right? As an investor, like winning the bid, like buying the asset, it's a victory, but your pain is just getting started, because you then have to manage the investment, you have to grow it and manage it and not screw it up, right? And then you have to exit it, you have to sell it profitably, and yeah, again, if I had to underscore one thing, it's that moral compass. Like, all right, we really need this policy. We're going to bribe or not? And how much and so on, right? Again, our careers will be riddled with these kinds of like moral dilemmas, and you come to a point like, shit, like this is a big one. You sense it in your stomach, right? This is like a big crossroads, you know. And by the way, a lot of times that moral decision, like what you decide at that moment, will not come from your head. You know, may not come from your heart either. You know, it'll come from your gut. It'll come from just your stomach. You know, it's like like your whole life has prepared you for this moment, right? And you know, this will be moments big and small. And then you know, you only realize it in hindsight when you look back. It's like, wow, at that time, I thought it was a small moment, but it turned out to be a big moment. And thank God I made the right decision. And again, you know, you won't be able to study your way out of this, guys. You won't be able to make yourself so smart that you just make a smart decision at each of these moments. It's building your character, and so that when that moment comes, you know, your gut guides you in the right direction. It's not because you're smart, you know, it's because you're smart. You know, it's not because you're like book smart or like, but because you're life smart, you know, you're morally smart. You back away, right, from what would have been a disastrous decision, or all your life you've been sincere, right? So you make a sincere decision, right? Or all your life you've been a weasel, so you make sort of a weaselly decision, and you know, then there's a price to pay, right? It comes back to haunt you. So
Thank you, Patom, for the answer. I was actually planning to ask you, can you give final words to the students? But I think you just gracefully reminded everyone about the importance of moral compass. And I guess we can just end on that
character.
note.
Yeah, character's destiny, guys. You know,
Correct.
Let's all work on our character.
Agree, totally agree. And that, I think, will serve as a good reminder for everyone. So yeah, thank you so much, Patom, for your time. So I would like to invite everyone to give Patom a round of applause, thanking him for his time today and for his insight that he shared with us. So I know that you have to move on to your next schedule, Pat, but perhaps we can just take a quick photo, group photo with everyone. So Natasha will be helping out.
Yeah, there are 2 slides, yeah. So for the first slide, everyone smile. 1, 2, and then the second slide. Oh wait, okay, let me wait for people to turn on their videos first. Okay. Well, I'll give it a second. Okay, I think people's videos are on. Okay, everyone smile again. 1, 2. And then the next slide, 1, 2. Okay, thank you guys.
So I guess, yeah, Patom, because I think you have to move on to your next schedule. Feel free, Pat, to leave the room once again. Thank you from all of us for your time and for your insight. I believe everyone learned a lot from today, and it will lead us in the future for our career.
Thank you all for your great questions, guys, and all the best, and hope to see you all in due course.
Thank you, Pat.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
So so just before we wrap up the session for today, just want to share with everyone, let everyone know that if you haven't signed up for an account at kerja.io, please do so. It shouldn't take you like more than 5 minutes. And from kerja.io, I guess you'll get all the information about what will be the next talk, next events, even workshops that we are going to hold. And you can just easily find all the information there. So Tim, I think you'll be sharing the link URL for everyone. So if you guys haven't signed up, just click on the link, and it shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes to register for an account.
Yeah, it's literally just Kerja.io, guys. It's not a lot of. But please, we're doing a workshop with a top consulting company soon. We're doing a talk with a couple of CEOs, so it'll be fun. So, but thanks so much for showing up. Appreciate it. Right. And yeah, please go and do whatever it is you guys do on Saturday morning or Friday night. All right.
So that's it for today, I guess. Thanks everyone for your time. I guess have a nice weekend. Stay safe, and do please register at kerja.io and look for the next next talk information or next event information. Have a nice weekend, everyone. Bye bye.